Senate will come to order for this Monday, March 29th, 10 a.m. Roll call, please.
Roll call for legislative day number 28, Monday, March 29th, 2021. Anderson? Here. Baldwin? Whiteman? Here. Boner?
Here.
Bouchard? Case?
Present.
Cooper?
Here.
Driscoll? Ellis? French?
Here.
Murphy? Guru?
Here.
Hicks?
Here.
Hutchings? James?
Here.
Kinski?
Here.
Cole?
Present.
Cost?
Here.
Landon? Landon?
Here.
McEwen? Nethercott? Pappas?
Here.
Perkins?
Here.
Rothfuss?
Here.
Salazar?
Here.
Schuler? Scott?
Here.
Steinmetz? Wasserberger?
Here.
Baldwin? Excused. Bouchard? Excused, Mr. President. Driscoll? Excused. Murphy? Murphy? Murphy?
Here.
Hutchings? Excused. McEwen? Excused. Steinmetz excused. President Dockstetter.
Here.
Hutchings present. 20
Members, go ahead.
25 present, 4 excused.
Folks back there in the corner where Senator Driscoll usually sits, if he remains missing in action, one of you will have to pick up the duties and responsibilities of floor leader. You get to decide now. All right, let's proceed. Our prayer today is by Pastor. If I could just have you be quiet for just a moment, folks. Thank you. Prayer today is by Pastor Allison George, St. Paul's Lutheran Church. I've asked her to tell us a little bit about herself and her congregation before she offers prayer for the day.
Good morning. I definitely recognize a lot of your faces. You might recognize mine. I've been with you the past 2 years, little bouts of time. Can you imagine? Last time I was here was before the pandemic. There were like whisperings. It's been a long, long year. I'm pastor at St. Paul's Lutheran Church, just a couple blocks away from here. And I've been there since December 2015, a small and mighty congregation. Love it. Like to tell you all about my little toddler. The first year I was invited to come and pray with you, I told Judy, well, I'm about to give birth, so I cannot commit to anything at this moment. So he is now 3. I have survived a pandemic with a 2-year-old. So please congratulate me on that. I feel very proud of that accomplishment. That's right. Just happy to be here with you this morning. It is Holy Week in my tradition, which is the time that we mark Jesus's last bits of the journey on his way to that empty tomb and that Easter morning. So because I am a Christian and I will be here with you this week, I will be offering prayers that have to do with the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of Holy Week. And then everybody know what Thursday is called? Maundy, Thursday. And then on Friday, Good Friday. So I hope you enjoy these prayers. I'm going to do a little bit of a reading before each of them, but I'll keep it short. And if you recall in years past, I like to start with a big, deep breath. I believe that a breath is the simplest form of prayer. Scripture tells us that we can't, when we don't have the words, when we just can't make the words, the Spirit intercedes with sighs too deep for words. So I'm going to start us off with a big, deep breath. Let's do 2 for good measure. Wonderful. And you can do a little bit of rolling your shoulders when we do that too, if you'd like. So for this Monday of Holy Week, this is a reading from Psalm 36. Your love, O Lord, reaches to the heavens and your faithfulness to the clouds. Your righteousness is like the strong mountains, your justice like the great deep. You save humankind and animals, O Lord. How priceless is your love, O God. All people take refuge under the shadow of your wings. They feast upon the abundance of your house. You give them drink from the river of your delights. For with you is the well of life, and in your light we see light. Continue your loving kindness to those who know you, and your favor to those who are true of heart. Let us pray. O God, your Son chose the path that led to pain before joy and the cross before glory. Plant his cross in our hearts so that in its power and love, we may come at last to joy and glory through Jesus Christ, our Savior and Lord, who lives and reigns with you and the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen.
Mr. President Hicks, will you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Lay off.
Reading, correction, approval of the journal. Will the reading clerk please read the journal? Committee report.
Mr. President, your journal committee reports that the journal of March 26, 2021 has been read and recommends that it be approved. Senator Kolb, Chairman.
Any objections? There being none, the report is adopted. New business of the day, of course, on this today in history. I'm not sure I understand this one. On this day in 1988, Wyoming State Capitol is completed. Must have been some renovations in '88. Quote for the day: great minds discuss ideas, average minds discuss events, small minds discuss people. Hugh Cameron. Our status: Wednesday is the last day for bills to be reported out of committee in the second house. Unfinished business, concurrences, joint conferences, reports, appointments to the joint conference committees. Let's do that. Message number 305. House Bill 7. Conference committee. It's House Bill 7, Air Ambulance Membership Organizations. Nethercott Chair, Salazar, and Kolb. Message 307, House Bill 73, birth certificates, gestational agreements. Chair Steinmetz, Schuler, Baldwin. Message 301, House Bill 49, agency fee revisions. Kinski Chair, Beitman, Garou. Message 309, House Bill number 121, state-funded capital construction. Chair Perkins, Garou, Kinski. House bills on first reading. House Bill 247, first reading of the bill.
House Bill 247 engrossed law enforcement hiring practices sponsored by Representative Provenza, an act relating to peace officers, passed the House. Ayes 31, noes 24, excused 5.
House Bill 247 assigned to committee number 1, Judiciary. Reports from standing committees.
March 26, 2021. Mr. President, your committee number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred House Bill 197, engrossed, Connect Wyoming Program federal funding, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes Senators Guru, Hicks, Kinsky, Perkins, and Steinmetz. Senator Perkins, Chairman. March 26, 2021, Mr. President, Committee Number 1, Judiciary, to whom was referred House Bill 179 engrossed, optional municipal tax election. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes Senators Cooper, Cost, and Nethercott. No Senators French and Kolb. Senator Nethercott, Chairman. March 26, 2021, Mr. President, Committee Number 1, Judiciary, to whom was referred House Joint Resolution 9 engrossed, local government investment in equities. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes Senators Cooper, French, Kolb, Cost, and Nethercott. Senator Nethercott, Chairman. March 26, 2021, Mr. President, Committee Number 2, Appropriations, to whom was referred House Bill 207 engrossed, coal-fired generation facility closures, litigation funding. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes Senators Hicks, Kinsky, Perkins, and Steinmetz. No Senator Guru. Senator Perkins, Chairman. March 25, 2021, Mr. President, Committee Number 5, Agriculture, State and Public Lands and Water Resources, to whom is referred House Bill 188 engrossed, irrigation district loans. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes Senators Boner, Bouchard, French, Cost, and Wasserberger. Senator Boner, Chairman. March 29, 2021, Mr. President, Committee Number 1, Judiciary, to whom is referred House Joint Resolution 11 engrossed, state sovereignty impacted by federal actions. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes Senators Cooper, French, Kolb, Cost, and Nethercott. Senator Nethercott, Chairman.
Bills on second reading. House Bill 10. Second reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 10, COVID-19 Large Business Relief Program.
There are no amendments. House Bill 10, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. House Bill 19, second reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 19, Antique Motor Vehicles.
There is an amendment. Please read in the amendment.
House Bill 19 engrossed. House Bill 19's second reading amendment number 1 to engross copy, page 3, lines 6 through 9, delete.
Senator Furphy. This is your amendment, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm not sure we have that amendment. It's not on the electronic version. Does anybody else have it?
Okay, maybe not. I have it marked here. Let's set this back.
It must be coming, Mr. President.
Yeah, Senator Furphy, you want to note that we'll be setting it back until we have it for review? Okay, I'm agreeing with that. All right, done. This one's, we're going to set back House Bill 19 and the amendment till we get it back. Thank you, Senator Case. House Bill 38, second reading of the House Bill. There is an amendment. Please read in the amendment and the bill.
House Bill 38, Community Behavioral Health Priority Populations. House Bill 38, second reading amendment number 1 to engrossed copy, page 7, lines 11 through 16, delete.
Senator Case.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen, what this amendment does is to go into the definition of a behavioral health center, and it adds to that definition. Basically, it deletes the definition, but it repackages it and puts it back in. So it maintains the definition that we have now in the bill, but also adds this language. It's a section B, for the purpose of federal reimbursement, a tribal federally qualified health center, that's one that's run by the tribes, or a behavioral health service provider certified by the Indian Health Service of the United States Department of Health and Human Services. The purpose of this amendment, Mr. President, would allow for direct funding of some of our tribal partners. It actually saves the state money, and it recognizes that in tribal services, we have services that are provided by Indian Health Service. And then we also have a relatively new form called a 638, which is the tribes are providing their own services. One of the tribes is under the auspices of the Indian Health Service. It's certified, but they're doing it themselves. And the good co-sponsor that is on the bill is the chairman of the tribal committee, and I've served on that committee for a long time. This doesn't cost the state any money. It recognizes a relationship that we have with our partners providing these services in tribal country. Thank you, Mr. President. I ask for your support.
Thank you. Further questions or discussion on the amendment, Vice President Hicks? You're there. You got it. So, okay, let's do this again. Got a green light here, sir.
We got green. Just a quick question. Is this a duplicate or is there already services provided through BIA and other federal programs that this would create a duplicate program, or is this would be completely separate? That's all Mr. Chairman. Mr. President.
Senator Perkins?
Thank you. And another question for that. A number of years ago, probably it's been 8-10 years ago, we authorized the nations came and asked if they would have the ability to do a waiver for Medicaid and basically which would allow them to do Medicaid expansion on the nations. And I'm just wondering how, if that happened and how that's working and how that folds into this amendment that is proposed. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Any more before we go back to the amendment sponsor? All right, Senator Case, it looks like it's back to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. No, I don't believe that this has anything to do with the waiver that we supported and sponsored on behalf of our tribal governments to petition the federal government for increased Medicaid coverage on the reservation. To my knowledge, that waiver has never been granted. There's been a couple of meetings about it, but it's just kind of died in the bureaucracy land. I just want to say thank you to the Senate for doing that a few years ago. That was a good partnership. This is not doubling up on the money. We're doubling up on the programs, but it does, as I understand it, increase the ability of the tribes to get direct reimbursement from the federal government. It's an area where you don't want state money going into this. If you can avoid it, I would assume. We do other things by contract with the tribes that do involve state money, but this would actually free up state money. And this amendment was developed by the main proponent in the House, who worked very hard on this bill. And we didn't hear from one of the tribes until late last week that they thought this would be a good thing. And it's a positive thing for both sides. So, I asked you to pass the amendment. It recognizes the unique relationship we have in Wyoming with two sovereign nations sharing one reservation within this great state of Wyoming. And they are all citizens of Wyoming, but this is a way to make the funds go farther. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Okay. Are you ready for the question? Question being called. All those in favor. This is second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 38. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Amendment has passed. We are back on, Senator Scott.
On the question that was asked about the Medicaid expansion for the tribes, I didn't get up because it really wasn't relevant to the amendment, but it does deserve a little more complete answer. We passed that, I think, without controversy, because it was a way of the feds fulfilling their obligations, healthcare obligations to the tribes, which is something the feds have been very poor at doing. And we just have been unable to get anywhere with DC on that, unless it's changed in the last few months that I don't know about. But it is a warning about dealing with that particular bureaucracy. They can be just impossible.
Further questions or statements, discussion before we read the bill in? Okay, let's continue on. And just for the record, we are on House Bill 38. House Bill 38 having been read two separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Now let's go back to House Bill 19 for the record and have you read that in again, reading clerk, please.
House Bill 19, antique motor vehicles.
And for the record, there are no amendments. House Bill 19 having been read two separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. House Bill 95, second reading of the House bill. There
House Bill 95, game roadkill.
are two amendments. Read in the first amendment.
House Bill 95, second reading amendment number 1 to engrossed copy. Delete the.
Senator Hutchings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move second amendment reading to Senate file or House Bill 95 and ask for your favorable consideration. While I was sitting down in the committee, while this bill was being heard, I heard the agencies talking to the presenter of the bill, Mr. President, and they said they were pretty indifferent to the fees that were put on this bill, as were the conservation people. So what we're trying to do in this amendment is just delete all references to fees and take the bill back to its original language in regard to fees. One of the things I brought up earlier was during our budget session, we talked about $100,000 being added to this agency so that they can remove the carcasses. So in essence, people are actually helping our transportation and game and fish agencies by removing these carcasses. And also on this amendment, lines 17 through 20, we're just cleaning up some language, deleting the word wildlife or found dead. With that, Mr. Chairman, I sit for questions.
Questions for the sponsor or discussion? Seeing none, we are on first reading or second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 95. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The amendment has passed. Please read in the second amendment.
House Bill 95, second reading amendment number 2 to engrossed copy, page 3, line 8 after.
Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move second reading or amendment, second reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 95 and would ask for your favorable consideration. This is a friendly amendment to the bill. The first thing it would do would clarify that no person who has these certificates can donate their roadkill. That's just consistent with existing statutory language, which prohibits donating to a nonprofit organization. And then it also makes a clarifying amendment on the bottom of page 3, line 19, that that we're not authorizing anyone to illegally use their vehicle to take wildlife or to possess it. Just a friendly amendment to make sure that we're not saying we're giving people free license to try and actually hit wildlife on the road. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Questions or discussions on the amendment? We are on second reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 95. Questions, discussion? Question on the amendment. All those in favor. Second reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 95. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The amendment has passed. Go ahead, Senator Perkins.
Thank you for the proponents of the bill that we're on right now, the roadkill bill. A question that I'd really like to have answered tomorrow would be my experience is that donation of game and other things like that have certain restrictions with respect about what is there some kind of health regulation or something that regulates the ability of healthcare agencies, or nonprofit agencies to accept this, or is it just up to discretion, or how does this in reality work? Thank you,
Right.
Mr. President.
Question to be prepared for tomorrow. All right. Oh, Senator Landon.
Mr. President, thank you. And I was going to save comments until tomorrow, but third reading, you never know. I just wanted to share with the Senate today, this one raced through. You might remember it hit us at about lunchtime, appropriately enough. And so on committee of the whole, we really didn't have an opportunity to visit much about this bill. I just wanted you to know, Mr. President, I voted this out of committee so that the debate could occur here. And I wanted to watch this bill grow and develop and see where it ended up. This bill is not without some pretty major ramifications, particularly for our game and fish department. And I've got some real concerns about some of the hidden impacts that this bill might have. So I just wanted to share that with the body. Again, we didn't have much time to have a debate on the bill, but as it moves toward third reading, as it stands today, it's going to have to develop further for me to remain in support of the bill. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you for that observation. House Bill 95, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objections, it is so ordered. So folks, we're going to take a little break now. Looks like our U.S. Senator has come home to find us talking about roadkill. So we're going to get right into that. It's with great honor and privilege to welcome Senator John Brasso back to the Wyoming Legislature. Senator Brasso was sworn in to the United States Senate in 2007, having represented the people of Natrona County in the Wyoming State Senate from 2003 to 2007. In November 2018, Senator Brasso was reelected to the U.S. Senate with more than 67% of the vote. 67. He is the third ranking member in the Senate Republican leadership as chairman of the Senate Republican Conference. He serves on committees that directly impact Wyoming's economy, energy interests, public lands, national parks, and trade. In addition to other committee assignments, Brasso is the ranking member of the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee. Senator Brasso is known by many as Wyoming's doctor. During his 24 years as an orthopedic surgeon, Brasso served as president of the Wyoming Medical Society and was named Wyoming Physician of the Year. Senator Brasso has 3 children, Peter, Emma, and Hadley. He and his wife, Bobby, live in Casper. Please join me, Senate members, in welcoming home United States Senator John Brasso.
Thank you. Thank you. That's right. Jim Anderson leading the charge. Bill Landon, let's go. Very good. Landon, you moved. This was the desk that you kept clean for so many years. I know they all want to be next to you, Cale.
See that?
Not really, but yes, anyways. Wonderful to be back. You know, I love my time here. I sat right there for 5 years in the Wyoming State Senate. Just loved it. Loved it. When people say, how are things in Washington? And I say, it's always better in Wyoming, always. I think of the Wyoming legislature and think of my time here in this body where I learned all the lessons and it made all the difference. And so many things have changed. And we have, I mean, Afi, I'm looking at the desk with a computer on it. Everybody's computers. Tom's is up this way. Yours is that way. I mean, and then Charlie, some things never change. God, I thought they were going to take that out of here a long time ago. I don't mean you, Charlie. I mean, your bills. But it is, the last time I was here was February 20th last year. And since that time, we've been through a global pandemic and a pretty historic and consequential election. And when I come back, though, I always reflect on the lessons that I learned here in the legislature. And I had a chance to visit with some of you, I know at the new legislators retreat and the gathering by Zoom in November. But the lessons that I learned here are key to the way I try to continue with the Wyoming lessons in Washington. And there's the simple stuff like why government ought to be a watchdog, not a cow to be milked. And Jerry Geis used to sit at that desk, and Jerry Geis would always talk, former president of the Senate would always talk, and Charlie's knows this, and so many of you do. He would always say, watch out when Washington's sending you money. There are always strings attached, and be careful because it's blackmail and it's bribery. And the other lesson, we all knew that we did better if we limited government, limited in terms of spending and size and low taxes, reasonable regulations, and don't spend all the money. I mean, those are the lessons that I learned here in the legislature and continue take forward every day. And when you ask what the delegation is working on, every day we're talking about Wyoming jobs and the economy. And in the coronavirus era, for a year, we focused on paycheck protection loans, things that we could make sure that businesses could stay open. Then made sure that our hospitals could also use those paycheck protection when the hospitals weren't able to do elective procedures, many of which were essential, but not, if it was an emergency, it couldn't be done, which impacted so many of our healthcare providers in the state. So wanted to continue with that. We wanted to make sure that there was resources for kids to get back to school, and Wyoming did it better than ever. I mean, we came back to school in August, and there's still schools that haven't opened yet around the country. So in way after way after way, Wyoming has led the way. And then we wanted to get the disease behind us by coming up with an effective vaccine and doing more we can in terms of therapeutics and treatments so we could get back to the way we know life in Wyoming should be and that we want it to be. The lots of folks who come to Washington to visit, and I'm thinking of Stefan, you would always come back with from a military standpoint, others would come back to visit. Couldn't do that the last year. I mean, we did have the National Guard. They were there on for January 20th. They took over FedEx Field, which is where the Washington football team plays. They took over the press area. So they controlled all of that. We had about 150 Guard members there. I took them on tours of the Capitol. And then we had another smaller group that stayed through a couple of weeks ago. But they do us proud and they do a great job for us. But the reality is, and I talked to the House about this, we have a new administration and Wyoming is facing headwinds right now, economic as well as political headwinds at the way that the election turned out. And oil and gas energy is in the crosshairs. Now, as Dan mentioned, I'm the ranking member of the Energy Committee. I work with Joe Manchin. He's the chairman of the committee. And they said, can you work in a bipartisan way? I'm going to always work in a bipartisan way on things that are important to Wyoming. And to me, if we've got partners working with the University of Wyoming School of Energy Resources, we have bipartisan legislation there. The Integrated Test Center in Gillette, north of the Dry Fork Station, the issues with carbon capture and sequestration, all of which are critical to Wyoming and continuing to make sure our energy resources continue to be used. So yeah, I want to work with everybody on the issues that are important to Wyoming jobs and our economy. I'm going to continue in this role to try to bring people from Wyoming back to testify in Washington. The 4 years I chaired the Environment and Public Works Committee, I had over 30 people from Wyoming back to testify to share the Wyoming story with Washington, and whether it had to do with oil and gas or carbon capture or trying to delist the grizzly bear. All of those issues impacted Wyoming and impact the nation, and we're trying to move our Wyoming agenda forward. So we're going to continue to do that, and we must move forward. We do have an administration that doesn't necessarily see things the way that I learned the lessons here in the Wyoming legislature. They see things very differently in terms of regulations, in terms of energy, in terms of taxes, in terms of spending. And the impact on us in Wyoming can be dramatic in terms of the impact that that has on our ability to fund our roads and our schools and our hospitals and our communities. And those are the issues that you're facing here every day. But I will tell you that we're going to work with you in every way that we can. When the administration draws a target on the back of energy and pulls the trigger, you are going to have a delegation who will every day fight them tooth and nail for the resources that are Wyoming and that make Wyoming proud. We're going to not ever stop. We are a resilient state. If you look at the history of the state of Wyoming, and we're strong, we're resilient. We will come through this stronger than ever. I'm optimistic, and I saw that optimism all around the state. I still travel the state every weekend, visit with people, and have been doing that and continue to do it now. People in Wyoming are really an optimistic bunch. We have the vaccine and people are getting them all around the country, all around the state. That matters. I talked to one old rancher at an ag meeting, and he said, he's one of these guys, you know, grit, endurance, determination, raised through the school of hard knocks. He said, we've been through worse than this. And we are going to do very well in the future. I have no doubt about it, because that's the Wyoming spirit. Look, in this past year, we have lots of folks who really stepped up and moved forward and contributed in ways you would not have expected or not, but you're not surprised. And yeah, it's the armed services, it's our armed forces, the men and women in uniform. And I had a chance to be with some of them Thanksgiving in Al Udeid Air Force Base in the Persian Gulf. Those were at the Capitol as well. But also the men and women in the front line in terms of law enforcement in Wyoming, our first responders, our hospital workers, people in the grocery stores, people in the schools, people at every level who are on the streets and out there every day through an entire year of a pandemic. And I know they hear it from you, and I just want to make sure that they know that all of us really support and recognize and appreciate everything that they've done to keep Wyoming going at a time when other states have just absolutely shut down. So Wyoming does it best. We always have, and we're going to continue to do it that way. And it's great to be back with you in the state Senate. So God bless you, and God bless Wyoming. God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
On behalf of the Wyoming Senate, we say thank you to Senator Brasso, and he's still right out there in the front of things. I got up early Sunday morning when I was out west checking on my business to look in on the morning news programs. And there was U.S. Senator John Brasso on the national news. So appreciating finding time to come visit the Senate. Thanks, Senator Brasso.
Audrey's not here. You want to sit and make some votes? Got some business today. You want to be majority floor leader too?
We can easily let you take over the MFL's place there, Senator. Somebody needs a picture of that there and sitting on the floor.
No, he would never want to be seen at a desk this messy.
All right, let's proceed with second readings, folks. House Bill 12, second reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 102, Wyoming
Or excuse me.
Preference Act of 1971 amendments.
House Bill 102 for the record correction. House Bill 102, there are no amendments. House Bill 102 having been read two separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. House Bill 115, first reading or second reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 115, big or trophy game animal, minimum hunting age.
There are no amendments. House Bill 115 having been read two separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. House Bill 135, second reading of the House Bill. Senator Hicks. Oh, Senator Landon.
Mr. President, thank you. No offense taken. Mr. President, I have an amendment coming for this bill. I would ask that it be set at the bottom of the list if we could, please. Thank you.
All
It
right.
should be here momentarily, but if we just go to the bottom with it, I think we'll be all right. Thank you.
House Bill 115, down. We'll move on to House Bill 144, second reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 144, electric vehicle fee updates.
House Bill 144, electric fee updates, haven't been read two separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. Sorry, Senator Nethercott, did you have something there?
Mr. President, I would just request that House Bill 135, Hank-Co Leadership Highway Designation, be laid back for another day.
Absent objection, House Bill 135 will be laid back for one more day. House Bill 150, second reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 150, state budgeting and expenditure authority.
There is an amendment. Read in the amendment.
House Bill 150, second reading amendment number 1 to engrossed copy, corrected copy, page 2, line 6 after.
Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 150 and ask for your favorable consideration. Fellow senators, you know we've been working this bill through the process, and we mentioned we might have another amendment that is now the corrected one. So that it starts out on page 8, line 3. We are just adding, and from federal funds as provided under this paragraph, we're adding federal funds to the list of the funds we're identifying in this subsection. And then the next amendment on page or line 19 of your amendment, it goes to page 13, line 2. We talked about what the threshold should be for us to come into a special session. And we agreed that $1 million was probably a little bit too low, and we wanted to find a good number there. So we went and visited also with the chief executive's office, And we agreed on $10 million being the amount that we would look at before we start contemplating a special session. Just for those of you, for your information, it's about $400,000 for a special session. So we thought we needed a higher threshold than $1 million. And then on page 14, lines 1 through 11, we are deleting section G, and that is a separation of powers issue. It has to do with salaries that are usually taken in through the executive branch. The executive branch usually deals with executive branch salaries. So we're deleting that. If someone doesn't like that, we have made this amendment divisible, but it was something we thought we maybe needed to clean up. And then the last thing we're doing with this amendment is we're making the act effective immediately so that it will be effective for the ARP funding that we're dealing with coming in through this next round of stimulus. So that is the amendment. I'd stand for any questions.
Questions for the sponsor, Senator Ellis?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a little bit more information on the estimate of 400,000 for a special session. Is that based on the number of days that we met this last year in 2020? I just want to know a little bit more if information is available.
Collect any more comments or questions for the sponsor before we go back? Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And my apologies, I think I missed the discussion on this when we talked about it in committee of the whole with the original amendment. But I would like a little bit more background and discussion on the idea of legislation effectively telling the governor that under certain circumstances, he should call us into a special session, or that we would potentially consider a special session. I struggle to understand why we would need or want anything about that. We are constitutionally empowered to call ourselves in under certain obligation, under certain circumstances. Governor is constitutionally allowed to. Why would we need any words about it in a bill? And I'm sorry that I didn't ask that under committee of the whole, but appreciate the fact that I have an opportunity to now.
Any further questions for the sponsor? Okay, Senator Steinmetz, we're back to you.
Mr. President, on question 1, that's just what our good fiscal staff told us when we were contemplating what number it should be. And 2, my good senator from the Ivory Tower, who I keep running into over every day of our break, we, in visiting about this, remember this bill just takes a 10-day pause for what the action the governor is taking. When we take that 10-day pause, the action is referred to the JAC committee. The JAC committee comes back to your presiding officers, makes the recommendation, then the legislature is polled, and that's how we come back into a special session, just like is contemplated in every other time. So that's what it is. It's the 10-day pause. And so we're putting the $10 million mark on there instead of 1 million, which was in the amendment previously. So appreciate your aye vote on the amendment.
Question being called. All those in favor of a second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 150. This is to the engrossed copy, corrected copy. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The amendment has passed. We show a second amendment here. Reading clerk, read it in.
House Bill 150, second reading amendment number 2 to engrossed copy, page 3, line 14, delete.
Senator Scott.
Mr. President, I move adoption of this amendment. Mr. President, this amendment will fit in with nicely with the one we just adopted. What this does is tries to deal with the problems that the federal stimulus causes with its maintenance of effort requirements, which can really, we've looked at them hard in the education area, and if we don't get them under control, they could cause us a world of difficulty by restricting what we can do. And if we violate those maintenance of efforts, then we have to pay back a lot of money to the feds. That's not a good deal. And if they aren't properly controlled in the educational case, they go out to all the school districts. And if they don't spend them properly, we could wind up with a great big bill coming back, and we could wind up frittering them away for things that are less than the essential. educational services we need them for. And what this does is say that they've got to get where they have a major maintenance of effort or maintenance of equity, which is also present in the education ones. They've got to get the consent of the legislature before they can actually start spending them or sending them to the political subdivisions. Mr. President, I did consult with the chairman of the Appropriations Committee on this. We're trying to exempt out the things where we really don't need to have that or where it might get in the way, like for a disaster relief or something. We had to go one step further than they were available when I consulted with him Friday night. I think we've got it right, but if we don't, we'll be back on third with a technical correction, Mr. President. So it is very important, because if we don't get control of them in the education area, and the recalibration bill will do that, then we're in real trouble, and we shouldn't be accepting those federal funds, because it could be very expensive trouble. So, Mr. President, for those reasons, I urge adoption of the amendment.
Further discussion for the sponsor, Senator Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Had a couple of members of appropriations. I had a long discussion with the bringer of this amendment. I think it's a step in the right direction. As you look at these things, Mr. Chairman, ultimately the problem we have is we accept federal funds. If they get baked into the cake, it may exacerbate our problem going forward. I think that the only thing as we talk about this, and I think we need, Mr. Chairman, on this amendment and with the one we just passed, I think we need to come back in, and they're great amendments. I think we just need to figure out some materiality issues about how we do this. If someone accepts $10,000 to something, it may have a technical increase in the maintenance of effort, but it's just not worth the effort. On the other hand, if it's going to be material enough that it has that, then it is. We ought to just, if nothing else, provide the opportunity to take a pause and see if it's good or not good in the long run. And so that's what these are getting after, and working on a member third reading that'll hopefully marry some of these concepts together. But ultimately, I do think this is a step in the right direction. Mr. President, it really is kind of like being at a sale, and sometimes you just can't afford, no matter how good the bargain is, you just can't afford it. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Is tracking the sale part. Further questions, Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, and to the sponsor, I'm curious about political subdivisions and distributions out, which I believe are direct distributions out to our cities, towns, and counties. There is some discussion about political subdivisions in this amendment. It's agencies at the top. It's a little bit unclear to me how this would affect that and whether there would have to be an appropriation prior to use by the cities, towns, and counties. Although I believe in the ARP Act, those are direct distributions out to the cities, towns, and counties, not necessarily to and through the state. So I'm curious how it would engage with that. And honestly, I'm not entirely certain whether there's any type of maintenance of effort aspect of that. So I'd ask if that has been looked into, whether there are maintenance of effort requirements associated with the cities, towns, and county distributions. And then finally, if there are any other funds that it's contemplated for this to apply to. There are a couple that probably come to mind directly, but what is the exhaustive list of entities that this would apply to with a maintenance of effort requirement? Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Further discussion, Senator Landon.
Thank you, Mr. President. I had a hard time hearing all of what my colleague from Albany County asked, and I apologize if this is a repeat, but a couple of things come to mind. Representing a district wherein as many as 48% of our students in my part of the world accept free and reduced lunch help daily. I'm just wondering if this pertains to programs like that. That's a little bit concerning if we receive that kind of federal funding that may assist us further on that front. And I'm hoping that this isn't saying that we cannot accept that kind of help. So maybe a little more specificity as to as to what federal funds this might prohibit. Thank you.
Senator Perkins?
Mr. Chairman, I'll try and answer that from what I understand, and then I'm just trying to answer a couple questions for the sponsor, and then he may be able to amplify on that as well. One of the things that we're finding as we kind of unpack the ARP funds and the ARP is they've come into a couple issues with respect to the maintenance of effort and also maintenance of equity. And there's also some other concepts that have entered in this package called proportionality. And so, for example, if your proportionality means that when you have some of these funds or you accept some of these funds, one of the issues you have to have is you have to maintain a certain proportionality between all government spending and what you do in a specific department. And so what that, for example, we were talking about with respect to education and Department of Health, there's about and some of that in the Department of Health has this proportionality, which means this total expenditure of state government. And that, the question we talk about expenditure, is that appropriation? Is that actually the expense? Is that actually the spending? Exactly what that means, we're not exactly sure yet. But the other thing that it also excludes specifically capital construction, it includes R&D and I think one other, which escapes me right now, is not included in that. But how you interpret that is kind of interesting. But what we did find is we were talking about some of this with respect when we were wrestling with the budget bill, is that, for example, that the block grant to the University of Wyoming is about 250 million or so, and then all the spending in the Department of Health, is about 1.9 billion, and ultimately, so what that means for every dollar that you spend in the Department of Health, every $6 or $8 you spend in the Department of Health, you have to spend one additional dollar in education to keep this proportionality requirement going. So it's these types of interrelationships and understanding how they go. And long story short, Mr. President, if you have to spend 60 million to get 40 million, or you have to spend 40 million to get 40 million, is it really worth that effort? And so the whole purpose of this is to try and find a minute for everybody to just take a breath, whether you're executive, whether the legislative, and look at this and try and understand what happens if this money is accepted. What does that do for our commitments going forward? Because once, for example, not in every instance, but in many of the instances in the ARP funding, Mr. President, once you take that, you're committed for at least 3 years, or you have to give it back. And so we just need to make sure that what we do going forward and the commitments we're making are sustainable. And so it's just an opportunity to take a breath. It doesn't mean to reject it, but it may mean to reject it if ultimately it's too expensive, or that there's other issues that require a continued effort of this going forward. It just may not, like I say, it may just in some instances be too expensive to accept. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further questions? We're going back to Senator Scott now.
Mr. President, it's hard for me to improve on that explanation. I will try to answer some of the specific questions. But I also will say this most recent stimulus, ARP, I guess we're calling it now, is fraught with all kinds of dangers of us becoming just a sub-agency under the full control and direction of the current administration in Washington, and with considerable harm done to our ability to manage our own affairs. I'm deeply concerned about it. And this is just really the first step in our trying to get control in our hands on this thing. Let me say, I don't think it affects a distribution that is going directly to one of our political subdivisions, because you don't have to have a B11 for that, I don't think. I think they can deal with that on their own. We'll double check and make sure that's right, but I think the way this whole bill is worded, that's the way it is. The subdivisions that we know of that would get funds on this, that would require the B11, that would come through this process, are the school districts getting approximately 270 million. And those, we really do need to put some controls on, or we will be on the hook the way our school finance system works for any mistakes. And we're, the recalibration bill is seeking to do that. So we'll get it taken care of that way. But if something happens and we don't get that, then we are in deep trouble with the stimulus, and it needs to be, the spending of it going forward needs to be put off until we can have a look at it and get some control, because that one has really expensive implications for us if we get it wrong. So for those reasons, I urge, Mr. President, urge adoption of the amendment.
Okay, we're on second reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 150. Ready for the question? Question being called. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The amendment has been adopted. Second reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 150, engrossed copy. House Bill 198, second reading of the House Bill. Oh, Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would request that House Bill 198 be laid back for one additional day.
Absent objection, House Bill 198 laid back for one additional day. Senator Perkins, would you like to fill in for the floor leader?
I think that's, Mr., just by my protestations, I was impressed upon. So yeah, I will be acting as the acting majority floor leader.
Before I call on you for consent list, let's check in with Senator Landon over here.
Mr. President, thank you. Just going back to our second reading list, and I apologize if I misunderstood, but I thought maybe House Bill 19, House Bill 135 had just been moved to the bottom of the list. Do we still need to deal with those? Do you still want to deal with them, or is it your intention to lay them back for a day?
Let's stand down, Senator Perkins. Let's do that. We move those down.
On 35, he laid that back. No, 198's been laid back.
Yeah, for the clarification, House Bill 135 and House Bill 198 have been laid back for one additional day. We do still have House Bill 119. And so with that, thank you, Senator Landon.
135 back from day.
19.
Thank you.
That's right. We just had a little difference here with the amendments. House Bill 19 has been read, so it looks like we are there, including 2 laybacks. So we're done with second readings, Senator, unless you got something.
Mr. President, thank you. I'll stand down for today. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
All right, no problem. Okay. Bills on third reading and final passage. Acting, Mr. Majority Floor Leader, do you have a consent list?
Mr. President, I do have a consent list. I move the following bills to be the third reading consent list for today, March 29th, 2016. The third reading, those bills consist of House Bill 22, Wyoming Military Code, House Bill 64, Uniform Fraudulent Transfer Act extinguishing claims, House Bill 79, subdivisions, House Bill 85, unlawful dissemination of an intimate image, House Bill 101, elk feeding ground closings requirements, House Bill 104, Uniform Trust Code amendments, House Bill 107, retirement system efficient disbursement method, House Bill 112, Pioneer Trapper License, House Bill 217, Community Health Center and Rural Clinic Grants.
Would anyone like any of these bills removed from the list? Having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall these bills pass the Senate? House Bill 22, Wyoming Military Code. House Bill 64, Uniform Fraudulent Transfer Act extinguishing claims. House Bill 79, subdivisions. House Bill 85, unlawful dissemination of intimate image. House Bill 101, elk feed ground closing requirements. House Bill 104, Uniform Trust Code Amendments. House Bill 107, Retirement System Efficient Disbursement Method. House Bill 112, Pioneer Trapper License. House Bill 217, Community Health Center and Rural Health Clinic Grants. Chief Clerk, call the roll.
On the consent list, Anderson, Baldwin, Whitman, Boner.
Aye.
Bouchard. Case. Cooper. Driscoll, excused. Ellis. French. Murphy. Murphy. Guru. Hicks. Hutchings. James. Kinsky. Kolb. Cost. Landon. McEwen. Nethercott. Pappas. Perkins. Rothfuss. Salazar. Schuler. Scott. Steinmetz. Wasserberger. President Dockstetter. On the consent list, 29 aye, 1 excused. House Bill 22, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing vote closed. House Bill 22, 29 aye, 1 excused. House Bill 64, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing vote closed. House Bill 64, 29 aye, 1 excused. House Bill 79, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing vote closed. House Bill 79, 29 aye, 1 excused. House Bill 85, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing vote closed. House Bill 85, 29 aye, 1 excused. House Bill 101, are there any changes? Case aye to no. Closing vote. Closing vote closed. House Bill 101, 28 aye, 1 no, 1 excused. House Bill 104, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing vote closed. House Bill 104, 29 aye, 1 excused. House Bill 107, are there any changes? Perkins? No. Closing vote. Closing vote closed. House Bill 107, 28 aye, 1 no, 1 excused. House Bill 112, are there any changes? Case aye to no. Perkins, aye to no. Murphy, aye to no, sir. Murphy, no. Guru? Guru, no. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 112, 25 aye, 4 no, and 1 excused. Senate, I'm sorry, that was House Bill 112. Now returning to House Bill 217. Are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. House Bill 217, 29 aye and 1 excused.
Having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the Senate, House Bill 22, Wyoming Military Code, House Bill 64, Uniform Fraudulent Transfer Act extinguishing claims, House Bill 79, subdivisions, House Bill 85, unlawful dissemination of an intimate image, House Bill 101, elk feed ground closings requirements, House Bill 104, Uniform Trust Code Amendments, House Bill 107, Retirement System Efficient Disbursements Method, House Bill 112, Pioneer Trapping License, and House Bill 217, Community Health Center and Rural Health Clinic Grants have passed the Senate. Continuing with third readings. House Bill 68, third reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 68 engrossed, Wyoming Statutory Foundation Act amendments sponsored by Representative Greer, an act relating to the Wyoming Statutory Foundation Act.
There is an amendment, Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 68 and ask for your favorable consideration. Big decisions here, senators. We're changing an R to an is, grammatical correction in the bill. Ask for your favorable consideration.
Question. No roll call. Question on the amendment. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. Amendment has passed. Third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 68. Ready for the question on the bills. House Bill 68, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? The chief clerk will call the roll.
House Bill 68 roll call. Anderson? Baldwin? Beitman? Boner?
Aye.
Bouchard? Case? Cooper? Driscoll excused. Ellis? French? Murphy? Guru? Hicks? Hutchings? James? Kinsky? Kolb? Cost? Landon? McEwen? Nethercott?
Aye.
Pappas? Perkins? Rothfuss? Salazar? Schuler? Scott? Steinmetz? Wasserberger? Anderson? Excused. President Dockstader? Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. House Bill 68, 28 aye, 2 excused.
House Bill 68, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the Senate, House Bill 68 has passed the Senate. House Bill 133, third reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 133 engrossed, online sports wagering, sponsored by Representative Waters, an act relating to online sports wagering.
There is an amendment, Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 133 and would ask for the body's favorable recommendation. Senators, what this bill or this amendment does is starts trying to provide some consistency through our gaming statutes that are emerging. And so the language that you'll see here in this newly created subsection H really mimic what we've worked on in the context of skill-based games. So much of this language should look very familiar to you. These are automatic grounds for denial when an applicant applies for a sports betting permit. And so you'll see that this is all consistent with language we've looked at before about denying an applicant based on, you'll see it outlined in a newly created paragraph J. If the permit holder has been convicted of, forfeited bail, or pleaded guilty to crimes involving theft, bribery, or unlawfully influencing a public official, or any felony crimes involving physical harm or any other crimes identified by the commission's rules. Again, more consistency language you'll see on the bottom of the amendment that if the applicant tampers with documentation or fails to disclose material information to the commission, that could also be grounds for dismissal. And then moving on to page 2, if they fail to cooperate with an investigation involving crimes related to gambling, any bribery or corruption of public officials, or organized criminal activity. And so to track this a little bit for you, that's what the amendment does, but it also incorporates other elements in House Bill 133 that are a little unique to online gaming, where sports wagering. And so if you go to page 18 of the bill, you'll see Romanet 2, that the applicant or permit holder has intentionally not disclosed the existence or identity of other persons who have control of the applicant. That paragraph would also remain intact, as well as the applicant or permit holder has had a permit revoked by a government authority responsible for the regulation of sports wagering. That requirement would remain intact. It would delete, though, the Romanet 4 and Romanet 1. Again, those ideas and concepts would be provided for in the substance of the amendment you see before you. And then finally, going on to page 9, you'll see some language about the applicant or permit holder who has not demonstrated to the commission financial responsibility. That would remain intact, but it would also be clarified that the commission has to define what that means by rule so that we're not getting arbitrary decision-making. And then finally, on page 19, Romanet 6, that would be renumbered, just a kind of a catch-all that the applicant or permit holder has not met the requirements as defined by commission rules. So really, this is an attempt to start providing some consistency for our gaming commission so that they can start uniformly processing some of these applicants with a better understanding of what the state of Wyoming is looking for. So with that, I'd offer your, are happy to answer any questions.
Questions on the amendment, discussion on the amendment. Senator Wasserberger.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. We see this as a friendly amendment and would ask that you support it. Essentially, if you look closely at all the list on this amendment, you'll see that these are things that we do in other areas of the statute anyway. And so on and in favor of the amendment, thank you.
Further discussion on the amendment. We are on a third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 133. Question being called. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The amendment has passed. We are now back on the bill. House Bill 133, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? The chief clerk will call the roll.
Roll call on House Bill 133. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? Aye. Beitman? Aye. Boner?
Aye.
Aye. Bouchard? Aye. Case? Aye. Cooper? Aye. Driscoll excused. Ellis? Aye. French? Aye. Furphy? Aye. Guru? Aye. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? No. James? Aye. Kinsky? Aye. Cole? Aye. Cost? Aye. Landon? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Perkins? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Scott, no. Steinmetz? No. Wasserberger? Aye. President Dockstader? No. Case I to no. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. House Bill 133, 24 aye, 5 no, 1 excused.
Senate File 133, House Bill 133, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the Senate, House Bill 133 has passed the Senate. Signing of enrolled acts. We're at that order of business. signing of enrolled acts. Enrolled act. Enrolled act number 15, original Senate File 135. Reader?
Senate Enrolled Act number 15, being original Senate File number 35, an act relating to administration of government.
So signed. Enrolled Act number 16, original Senate File 21.
Senate Enrolled Act number 16, being original Senate File number 21, an act relating to administrative procedure.
I'm about to sign House Enrolled Act 30. House Enrolled Act number 16, original Senate File 21. I've so signed. Enrolled Act number 17, original Senate File 23.
Senate Enrolled Act number 17, being original Senate File number 23, an act relating to public meetings.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act 17, Senate File 23. I've so signed. Note before we go into general file regarding our joint conference committee procedures. We're at that time when it's, we're ready to be holding those joint conference committees for House bills will occur in meeting room 113 downstairs just below us. And the Senate files will occur in meeting room 110. And that's to help ensure that we can do the live broadcasts of those conference committees. All right, Mr. Acting Majority Floor Leader, we're at that order of business, consideration of bills on general file.
Do a joint conference committee.
Oh,
on
we can do that
HB1.
too. We can, are you ready for that?
Mr. Chairman, if we could just check with the chief clerk and make sure this is the right time.
Chief Clerk, does this work with you? Madam Chief Clerk. Okay to do a joint conference committee on House Bill 1? Got the nod of approval, sir.
Okay. I thought that's what we talked about earlier, so.
I've got a huge list up here. We talk about. a
I'm
lot of
easily
things.
confused, Mr. President. So with that, Mr. President, I would move Joint Conference Committee Report number 1 to House Bill 1, which is General Government Appropriations 2, which is the budget.
We got to have that read in. Let's have Rita
thank
read
you.
it in real quick. Go ahead, Rita.
Joint Conference Committee Report number 1 on House Bill 1, General Government Appropriations 2.
Now you can move it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. for your
Thank
patience.
you, Mr. President. I would remove Joint Conference Committee Report number 1 to House Bill 1, General Government Appropriations 2, and ask for the body's favorable consideration. Members, I think you should have, I think we have distributed to your desk. You'll see the Joint Conference Committee Report. And there, if you'll notice, there's kind of two documents. There's this one that's two-sided, that's got some shading on it. And then the other one is the actual Joint Conference Report itself. And then the third one is this big color sheet here that's got all of those things on it. If you've got that, then we're ready to start down through this Joint Conference Committee Report. Does anybody need a minute to find those or doesn't have them if they wanted them?
Everyone have the big sheet like this.
All right, so with that, while people are still getting oriented, just a couple of introductory comments to the Joint Conference Committee report, just some overall numbers. The House adopted 24 budget amendments during the budget process, and the Senate adopted 16, inclusive of separately voted and divided amendments. So ultimately, the House adopted 8 more budget numbers than we did, than the Senate did. One of the biggest issues that we had in this if you remember our discussions, is we were not all that far apart on general fund and SIP appropriations combined. We were substantially apart, about 160 million apart on fund transfers. And so what I would tell you, and we'll get to the specifics in a minute, is ultimately we pretty much split the baby in a lot of respects on general fund. The transfers though, what you'll see in what we've done is they agreed to, we had proposed, as we had in our budget, 1/3 of those transfers, about $160 million go into the principal of our corpus of the Wyoming Permanent Mineral Trust Fund, and 1/3 would go into the corpus of the Common School Permanent Land Fund. The House on the other side of that, Mr. President, was that they had 160 million going to various reserve accounts that would be available for expenditure appropriation. We've used those over the years for expenditure appropriation. We've used them to backstop or securitize loans. We've used them for a number of reasons. And ultimately, that's what their position was. The resolution that we had in all that is that, and the compromise that we propose to you is that of that $160 million, 1/2 of it will be deposited into the corpus of the Wyoming Permanent Mineral Trust Fund. And 1/2 of it will be deposited into the corpus of the Common School Permanent Land Fund. One thing to keep in mind about that, a substantial portion of that was the 1% severance tax account. Of those severance taxes, approximately 1/3 of those have actually are severance taxes from Wyoming state leases or leases held on Wyoming state properties. Most of them, in the vast majority of those in the common school, held by the Common School Permanent Land Fund. And over the years, those have much of those, when they were deposited to the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund corpus when they were deposited. And so ultimately, from our perspective, in both of those areas, there's a need for that funding in the future, and for us to deposit those into the corpus where they can earn interest moving forward, and income for both of those entities going forward seemed to be us a very wise step for the state of Wyoming as a whole. Keep in mind that 160 million at a 4% return will equate to about 12, a little better than 12 million a biennium combined between those two that will happen forever. And so that, to us, that seemed a great deal. But anyway, as we move down through this, I think one of the easier places to do it is if you pull out the sheet that's got the Joint Conference Committee report that's got some comments out to the side of each of the amendments, and then also has some of those you'll find are highlighted, or at least in what do they call that, gray? I forget what they call it, grayscale, highlighted in grayscale. So what you see in the first two, if you look at the adopt the following House amendments and adopt the following Senate amendments, you'll notice that there are 6 House amendments that were adopted. There were 3 Senate amendments that were adopted. However, 3 of the House amendments that were adopted were simply technical corrections, or very nearly identical with provisions out of the Senate. Those specifically would refer, if you'd go to the third one down on the, which is the HB 0001 H2 26. So that's House Second Reading Amendment 26 was adopted. That was at 3 FTEs to the state treasurer. That was identical to our Senate file third reading amendment number 1. In addition to that, there were technical corrections. One of them was technical corrections, which was House Third Reading Amendment 25. And then one of the other ones was the 2 of the others were House Third Reading Amendment 26, which allowed UW revenue bonds for Bison Run apartments. That was simply not something we discussed on this side. It allows UW to actually do a bond issue to purchase the Bison Run apartments with revenue bonds. And from the information we had, saves the university about if done successfully in the current market and interest rate environment, will save the university and purchasing out the private portion of that public-private partnership about $400,000 a year. So that seemed to us a good reason to adopt that one. The other one, if you look, that was unique to the House and not to the Senate, was House Second Reading Amendment 12, the first division. which was it put back weed control and noxious weeds and also invasive species on state lands. The budget originally stripped all of that out, those state lands. If we let that go for a year and don't work on that for a year, we'll spend quite a bit more. We thought that we'd spend quite a bit more than the $500,000 to do that. So it seemed to us to be wise to do that. So if you look at that as far as just out and out numbers, there really are only about 3 House amendments that were adopted to the 3 Senate amendments that were adopted, if you're keeping score that way. When you take out the ones, the revenue bonds, the identical one on the FTEs, the state treasurer, and technical corrections, there really is about the same number were adopted. Then what we do oftentimes is we go out and we delete a number of House amendments. We deleted a number of Senate amendments, and you see that there's a little bit of a difference there. Some of that is because the House typically passes more amendments to the budget than the Senate does. And then also what we did is we went back and forth on these. We traded a number of them. That's where a lot of the budget, the transfers of the 160 million we spoke to a minute ago, as well as basically finding middle ground on the general appropriations with a couple of exceptions. So if we'll do that, what I'll do, Mr. President, if there's any questions on the first adopt the following House amendments and adopt the following Senate amendments. So that gets us down to just before. So prior to deleting that following House amendments, we'll just pause there and ask if there's any questions on that, if that's okay, Mr. President.
Please proceed.
So if there are any questions, we'll just please go on those items, please stand up and ask them. And seeing none, Mr. President.
There are no questions. Carry through.
We'll continue on.
I have an agreeable crowd today.
Well, and we'll see we'll see if we can maintain that. So if you look, one of the things we did is on House Reading Amendment number 2. So now we're in the delete the following House amendments. You'll see there that they had, we deleted an amendment. We had defeated this a couple of times, but on this side, and it was one that they had passed, but they deleted the restoration of $2,034,000 to the veterans tax exemption. That was deleted. Again, what that is state funding of those tax exemptions. It does not affect the actual tax exemption. They still get that. The state will be paying for about, as it stands now, the state will be paying for about 2/3 of that tax exemption. And this $2 million represents about 1/3, which the counties will be paying. Next to House Second Reading Amendment number 7, which was adopted. If you remember, we had some footnotes and we had a very similar amendment in the Senate. This was restored one position to the Geological Survey and also restored footnotes to continue the work of the Geological Survey on hydrogen and rare earth minerals. We deleted the House amendment with the restoration of the funds, but it left all of the same language in the budget footnotes that we had both in the House and pretty much in the Senate as well. On House Second Reading Amendment number 9, which was there was about $225,000 to restore high-risk infant care in the Wyoming Department of Health. We deleted that. Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, to just tell you what we did with respect to the Department of Health and the Department of Family Services, just to bring to your attention, and what we did as we go through this, it may help you understand the process we went through. But ultimately, the Senate had added back about $8 million to the Department of Health. The House had added back about $18 million to the Department of Health. So it was clear that both parties were adding money back to the Department of Health. So we had added ours, I think $6 million to the $6 million, a little over almost $6.5 million to comprehensive waivers. The Senate had done that. Senate also added roughly $4 million back to the Wyoming Home Services. So that was what we had added back. The House had added back on a fairly comprehensive amendment that they had adopted in second reading, the $18 million that was spread among most all the things that had been cut of the significant programs in the Department of Health. What we did is with us at 8 and them at 18, that left us 5 apart. So the midpoint was 13 million. So we got our good vice chairman, the good senator from Sheridan, or at least the mediocre senator from Sheridan. He's certainly better than Midland, I think, but anyway, the good senator from Sheridan and a like member from the Appropriations Committee, the Joint Conference Committee from the House. They got with the Department of Health and said, all right, if we've got 13 million more we're putting back, where do we put it back that it does the most good and does the most benefit? And so we allocated back the 12 million between the House, or the 13 million back into those positions. It came to about 12.8 or 12.9 million total. And they put it back. And in those two particular programs, they adopted the Senate positions on where we were on restoring money to the developmental or the DD waivers and also the Wyoming Services Program. They adopted that, and the rest of it was sprinkled through the other programs, which, like I said, in consultation with the Department of Health, thought that they would do the most good for the most people. Many of those, most of those will also be matched with federal money that will come back, but some of it not, like in Wyoming Services, and some of the others don't have federal match ability. But that's ultimately the way that we resolve the differences between the House and the Senate on the Department of Health. And so that gets us into, so one of the ones that didn't make the cut was what we talked about was House Bill 2009, which was restoring funds for high risk and infant care. That was deleted. Second reading amendment number 17 in the House was DFA, stands for delete and further amend. And so that is restoring 6 FTEs to the Department of Corrections related to special revenue. Those are probation and parole officers, and important for us for those to maintain. They have very heavy caseloads, and we wanted to maintain those. And you may remember that there was another bill that related some to the funding and collecting fees that also cover part of that. Ultimately, we cut the appropriation in half, kept the 6 FTEs, and believe that if the other bill passes, that'll more than compensate the rest of the compensation for the FTEs. On House Bill Second Reading Amendment 22, we deleted these fund transfers to increase the maximum balance for the PMTF and the Common School Permanent Land Fund to 225%. Those were deleted. We also deleted we deleted the House amendment for 10 million of SRA on a 1-to-1 match with the Department of Employment for carbon capture. That was deleted, but since that was in both houses, we actually kept the Senate version because it had better controls, and then amended that language a little bit too. Second reading amendment 35, that was deleted and further amended. That was a fairly comprehensive amendment that had restored a number of the expenditures. The LSRA particularly went back and restored essentially all the step 3 cuts that the governor had recommended. And so we deleted and further amended that, and that's where we put most of that 13 million went among the various programs that were in that amendment from the House. We deleted and further amended second reading amendment 39, and what that was, House amendment, if you remember, we had this body had cut 6 million, roughly 6.5 million from the university's block grant, and had put that into developmental dissuade. And we'd also had an overall cut of $10 million to the University of Wyoming, in addition to the 49, almost $50 million of cuts recommended by the governor. We found out as we did that, Mr. President and members of the Senate, that in doing so, going back to those maintenance of equity and maintenance of effort things that we found out in relationship to all spending, but ultimately we found out that that there's $44 million that goes to higher education, and potentially put all of that at risk by having those cuts. Ultimately, if we kept with the LSO had calculated we were within $1 million of violating. We were within $1 million of violating the maintenance of effort, maintenance of equity issues, and also the proportionality issues with the Department of Education in cutting that block grant. So ultimately, what we did, this body had also added 10 million back to the community colleges in cutting that 10, and ultimately we came back and we landed on basically $8 million to the junior colleges and $8 million to the university. So effectively, that's what that delete and further amend did. The House third reading amendment number 1, contingent appropriation on if the death penalty SF 150 had passed, the death penalty had passed. As you know, that didn't pass, so that was deleted and it was no longer necessary to have that in the budget. House third reading amendment number 4 was deleted and further amend to restore the JAC cut of 1 FTE to state parks. And so we did that, but the amend was they had some language in there that the Department of Parks and Cultural Resources or the Division of Parks could never be less than 50 employees, and we just deleted that language. There's no other department that has any language of that sort. That says you have to have at least that many employees no matter what. On the House third reading amendment number 9, deleted and further amend. That was the, on this side, there was a $10 million match for UW cryptocurrency on a 1-to-1 match on this side. That had failed on I believe it was a 15-14 vote or either a 16-14 vote. Was narrowly defeated. They did it for 4 million more, or excuse me, 6 million less for 4 million. They also had a 1-to-2 match, so that for every dollar of that, there has to be 2 matches from other sources for that. And so ultimately, we adopted that $4 million, but we also put in, we had the cryptocurrency where they have to make the business case and they have to go to the cryptocurrency board and make the business case and all of that before it's ever awarded. And the governor ultimately has final approval. They adopted all that language and we deleted it. We added that into that amendment over there. And again, what that is really the cryptocurrency development is really just a really subset of that. What this really is a large IT infrastructure system that will allow research on blockchain, and of which cryptocurrency is just a very, very small part. The concept of this node and stake for cryptocurrency is just a way that this can pay for itself. And so it's just a little sidelight, but what this will do is continue to turn UW into one of the preeminent institutions for studying blockchain in Wyoming. But that's what we did with that. Third reading amendment number 11 was deleted. And that was a funds reserve that also, which provided for for one of those permanent reserves that created those trips and dips, and we deleted that. Deleted third reading amendment 14, which shifted to the state engineer's office. It shifted about $640,000 of administrative costs that are now in the general fund to water account 1. They withdrew that and allowed that, so that we'll still continue to have another 640 available out of water 1 for the projects that and research that to continue to develop our water in the state. On third reading amendment number 18, we deleted and further amend, and this was the PIN CapCon. That there's $30,500,000 that we actually had put into the LSRA. That went 1/2. That was the other portion of that got us to 160 on the funds. 1/2 of that went into the principal of the PMTF, and 1/2 of it went into the principal or corpus of the Common School Permanent Land Fund. Just so you know, one of the reasons that we did that was the new director of the Department of Corrections told us that if we can maintain our buildings now, we're 20 years away from having to build another penitentiary or penal facility. So that's one of the reasons we could do that. That takes us to third reading amendment number 22 with HR Personnel Consolidation Savings Report. This was a House amendment that really did something and provided a report that is almost done and will be presented shortly from A&I, and so it was just deemed it was unnecessary, and so it was deleted. Third reading amendment 23 again was another transfer, a budget transfer of up to $20,000 out of the LSRA. That transfer was deleted. Third reading amendment 24 increased the Hathaway Reserve maximum to 225%. That was deleted. The third reading amendment 27 was the 1% severance tax split was between the reserve accounts of the Permanent Trust Fund and the Common School Permanent Land Fund. That was deleted. Again, that money's going to corpus, not to the reserve accounts. What we did on the Senate amendments was we deleted the $10,000 for carbon capture and sequestration. We merged the language, and that was adopted in the House amendment as we discussed above. we deleted the second reading amendment 18, which was we actually deleted as further amended support for state land exchanges and sales. All the bills regarded to trading these lands out of the Bridger, Teton, and National Forest Service, those bills all died in the other body. And so ultimately, we reduced the amount by, I think, about $100,000. And also it's still dealing now just with the Medicine Bow National Forest and those land swaps. The second reading amendment 19 was deleted on the Educational Programs Task Force. We do have a budget in the bill, and ultimately we gave that one up, as we also did in the amendment that renamed it. On the second reading amendment 2020 First Division, those were, again, we deleted that. We restored that comprehensive waiver from UW State Aid. That money was restored. We did it through the amendment that we deleted and further amended in the House. On 2020, also on 2021 Division number 1, the Omnibus Act reverse selected JAC Act, and that was that omnibus bill. There was something we had to tidy up in there, which was the 10 million deletion or 10 million further cut to the university next year. We deleted that for the reasons we've talked about before. And then it also had to do with deleted and further amended the 1% severance tax split, and that's where we had it. That goes, like we said, now 1/2 to the permanent trust fund or 1/2 to the Common School Permanent Land Fund Corpi. Third reading amendment number 1 was similar, identical, and that just added the FTEs to the state treasurer. We just deleted ours and adopted theirs. They were essentially identical. Third reading amendment number 5 prohibited the grants for news services. We looked at that. It was problematic. We think the sponsor of that amendment believed that a strong message had been sent, and so we did negotiate that one away in exchange for some of the other items that we got. The third reading amendment number 8 amend and provide a direction to the WHA. I think that was the one that did the Wyoming services, and again, that was adopted at the level that we did. We just did it through adopting and further deleting and amending the kind of more global or comprehensive amendment from the House. Third reading amendment number 12 was related to third reading number 5. It just cleared up consent use of the task force inside the kind of the task force that was going to look at education. Again, we had then third reading amendment 16 was a budget balancer transfer of the LSRA. We had one, they had one, we had one. They were a high-low, and ultimately that was deleted and further amended. They were at 20, we were at 1, and so this is 5. This is just a budget balancer to make sure that we've got really close to the 5% in the statutory reserve account that we're supposed to have in there. The governor's supposed to have in there by law, and we try to maintain that. Senate file, third reading amendment number 18 reappropriated remaining funds in the COVID Relief Act. We've done that through Senate File 118 and House Bill 256. But there's another legislation that does that. We believe we've got that handled elsewhere, and so we deleted that out of this. We deleted that amendment. We think we've got that handled elsewhere. And then 319 was a technical correction. Ours was missing a $sign where it should have a $sign. Theirs had the $sign in it, and so we adopted theirs and deleted this one. That was the difference there. So, Mr. President, that takes us through all of those and tell you that ultimately what we did is we had the Joint Conference Committee spends just over $16 million in general funds, primarily for higher education, community college, and state aid for research. And JC maintains approximately $430 million of the $446 million of statewide cuts to the general fund that were instituted or came to you from the original JAC bill. So we basically backed off that point about $16 million. So that's approximately 96% of the budget reductions were maintained through the action of the conference committee if it's adopted. So we went back and forth a little bit of the LSRA for the most part. LSRA funds were not adopted. We tried to drain SIPA on other accounts. But ultimately there's about 17 million, that does come out of the LSRA. Mostly of that goes to fund some of the money we're putting back in the Department of Health. With that, again, I think we've got, between all the bills that are out there and this, I think we've got SIPA pretty much spent. The school capital construction, there was about $10 million in spending on the capital construction. By the way, let me go back. I didn't talk about that directly. When it's on the capital construction, what we did is the compromise we found is that we funded, there were two projects really that we were talking about funding through the budget. One of them, the difference between the House and Senate, they were about $2.5 million to get the project started for 10 Sleep Elementary School. And the other one was about $8.3 million, which was for the auditorium in Riverton. The compromise position was to continue to appropriate $2.5 million to continue to work on the 10 Sleep, and there is no general fund for the auditorium in Riverton. However, we did open it up and made it available so that if they can apply and receive ARPA funds to do that, or ARP funds to do that, as education, they're certainly able and willing to do that. That's an application that could be considered. And so ultimately, I think that is pretty much finishes the presentation explanation of the Joint Conference Committee. And with that, Mr. Chairman, we'll stand for questions.
Excellent presentation. Thank you. Further questions for the Chairman of Appropriations? Further discussion? Senator Landon.
Mr. President, thank you. Just wanted to go back over something that we spent a couple of readings here in the Senate, just to make sure that I understand where we did land. I believe that with our home health care program, I believe that I'm reading correctly that we 1.37 million is what we returned to that budget under the Department of Health's Aging Division, if I'm reading that correctly. So that's one question. I just wanted to know where we ended up with that one. And then, fellow senators, just a comment related to maybe a question. Really want to salute the Appropriations Committee for this budget. The fact that they were able to go down to the conference committee and hold that kind of cuts to this budget is a real tribute. Really proud of that. Regarding school capital construction, you guys, I hope you'll support the budget. Those two projects that the chairman of appropriations described to us date all the way back to about 2.5 years ago. I was the one that made the motion on both of those projects. Those were projects that have languished at the back of the pack for a long time, Mr. President. Kind of like a trip on the Oregon Trail out to one of those Western states. We had to drop off the piano. We had to throw a couple more things off along the way. And we were lucky enough, I think, to go back and get a couple of them. And those were two projects that literally have been on that list forever. And I think it's appropriate. I would remind you that that's the kind of thing that puts our people to work out across the state. That little 10 Sleep School, that community has done a heck of a job taking care of that old car. It's just time for a trade-in. And so I really appreciate the appropriations, keeping those projects in this budget. I think it's very appropriate. Hopefully, the second project over there in Fremont County can come up with that alternative funding, but at least we didn't wipe it off of the budget. And so thank you, Mr. President. Would like to know, just to be definitive on where we ended up with the Department of Aging. Thank you.
Senator Kinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. To my good friend from Natrona County, yes, your understanding is correct. We restored $1,374,947 to the aging program, which is the WISE program, the Wyoming Senior Services at Home program.
Further discussion, Senator Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you want a kind of a blow by blow of what we did in the Department of Health, if you go to page 3 of 6 on your extra large super duper color coordinated handout. And if you see down there, you can see what we did, basically items 12 through 16 on that page. And if you see down, you can see where we actually put that money back. And you can see individually where we're at. For example, if you go to that top paragraph, you increase healthcare financing by $12,004,546, of which all that money came out of the LSRA. It adds footnote 2 specifying about federal funds and for the out-of-home placements, children unit. It does 375 federal funds and an LSRA for optional services in the adult unit. It does $6,076,000 and change with a like amount of federal funds for the comprehensive waiver unit. See $4,076 and like amount of federal funds and LSRA for the adult services Medicaid unit, and directs Department of Health to submit exception budget requests from these for this. So they'll come back with exception budget requests on these items in the next budget, so we talk about those again and where we're at. You did remove the $200,000 from chiropractic services. That was a cut that was sustained. You drop down below, you can see other things that were lined out. You can see an increase of $145,000 of federal and LSRA funds together for the local service and for local services in the that we've got there. You direct the family services budget there. You drop down, you see again, you'll see some of these are repeats of what we had earlier, but you see the $6,549,880, which was which came out of UW. That, if you remember that particular amendment, the proposal that come out of UW, it ended up not coming out of UW as we've explained, but ultimately that went into the comprehensive waiver unit. You also see and you drop down to item 16, you see the $1,374,000. That was that Senate position on the Wyoming services. So you see that was adopted, and of course, so anyway, that was adopted. So you can see that helps you give a little bit better idea about where we landed in the Department of Health.
Senator Landon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Not to belabor, just to make sure I know what I'm taking home for our senior center directors and those who oversee that particular program. Is that an amount that will be included in a standard budget going forward? Is this a one-time shot in the arm so that we can at least have a handful of months that we can go home and figure out how to keep that program alive? Or what exactly are we looking at there to the chairman of appropriation? Thank you.
Further comment before we go back to the chair? Chairman Perkins.
Mr. Chairman, that is a one-time restoration, as are most of these. And they'll come back and they will not be in the base budget. They'll be made in exception budgets. And we'll have some of these discussions again, I'm sure.
All right, further discussion on our conference committee report. Further discussion. Ready for the question? Question being called. All those in favor of the conference committee report on House Bill 1? It's a roll call. So let it be. Roll call.
House Bill 1, Joint Conference Committee 1, roll call. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? Aye. Beitman? Aye. Boner?
Aye.
Aye. Bouchard? Aye. Case? No. Cooper? Aye. Driscoll excused. Ellis? Aye. French? I, Furphy. I, Guru. I, Hicks. I, Hutchings. I, James. I, Kinsky. I, Cole. I, Cost. I, Landon. I, McEwen. I, Nethercott. I, Pappas. I, Perkins. I, Rothfuss. No. Salazar. I, Schuler. I, Scott. No. Steinmetz. I, Wasserberger. I, President Dockstetter. Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. On Joint Conference Committee 1 to House Bill 1, 26 aye, 3 no, 1 excused.
Joint Conference Committee report to House Bill 1 has passed the Senate. Take us into lunch, sir.
Well, I will, but first I wanted to, I think Senator Salazar wants the privilege of the floor,
please do.
but it might have privilege of the floor first.
Oh, we got Senator Salazar. You just got bumped by the chairman of appropriations. Go ahead.
Chairman, Mr. President, we have several members of our LSO budget and fiscal staff in the back, and I want you to know, if you would, I'd just like us to take a minute and tell you how much we appreciate them. They do so much work. They make us look a lot smarter than we are, and although may not be saying much, I don't know that we look that smart, but nevertheless, to the extent we do look smart, they help us. They are just so good at providing information, alternatives, and doing so in a manner that doesn't suggest an outcome. They are so true to their mission of impartiality and presenting the information that you ask for in an unbiased way. And if you just take a minute, I would really appreciate if we gave them a round of appreciation.
Nice. Could we have them stand up? Please stand. Oh, that's it. That's what we wanted. Thank you for your very hard work. Senator?
Mr. President, if I may, just to finish that up, I just want you to know that what you had is, if you notice, their Furtis leader, Don Richards, got up and ran out before we could even show that appreciation. And that's because he just never wants that's just the way he is.
He is Mr.
just-
Low
does this.
Profile.
He's low profile. He never wants appreciation. He never wants to recognize or accept the recognition and appreciation we give him. But I just, again, Mr. Richards, he left two of his team here so they could accept our appreciation. But I just wanted to note particularly that Mr. Richards left because he just doesn't like that. That's just the way he is. Thank
That's
you.
just the way he is. But Mr. Richards, if you are listening, Don, thank you to you as well, sir. All right, Senator Salazar, privilege of the floor. Go ahead.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. President. Honorable members, I have a good friend visiting today. Mr. Tim Mills is visiting us from Washington, D.C., where he practices law. Mr. President, I feel much safer loading up with a high-priced D.C. trial lawyer as my guest today, so I would ask that you all welcome him to Wyoming.
Here.
Welcome to the Senate, sir. Glad to have you. All right, Senator Cost,
Privilege of the floor.
please do.
At this time, I would also like to recognize the Revenue Committee for the outstanding job they've done, because this has been a battle in the past, and it sure is nice to have what they've done come forward so well.
Our Appropriations Committee, but
Appropriation, not revenue.
our Revenue Committee was,
Oh heavens, I'll get it right sooner or later.
our Revenue Committee has perhaps been challenged lately. But for our Appropriations Committee, please stand.
Yeah. No comment.
Senator Perkins.
Mr. President, I think that just goes to show how what an unthankful and thankless job being on the revenue committee is.
We still appreciate your revenue committee. Senator Kinsky.
Mr. President, I did mention to one of my colleagues that I'd hoped in the future I wouldn't have the Department of Health, Department of Family Services, because I grow weary of being the bad guy. And they said, but you do it so well. But I don't want the moment to pass without a thank you to Chairman Perkins. He finished up a year as president, and he well-deserved a rest, but he wanted to rise once more and fill the breach and agreed to chair appropriations. And he's been an outstanding mentor and teacher for all of us on the Appropriations Committee. And I'd like to afford him recognition for that
Good,
as well.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, you came off a run with COVID and did the job. All of appropriations. You put in a lot of work, November, December, January. Thank you, appropriations. Here we go. Take us into lunch, sir.
So with that, Mr. President, I'd move that the Senate stand in recess until 2 o'clock.
Announcements? Senator Anderson.
Mr. President, your favorite committee, Minerals, number 9, will meet today at noon. 15 or 20 minutes after noon recess. And I would admonish the committee to be there. We got 2 big bills that we're going to talk about today. We'll meet in Capitol Extension Room 4 and online. First bill would be House Bill 166, Utilities Presumption Against Early Facility Requirements. And the second one is House Bill 170, Wyoming Economic Development Zones. We have 3 other bills, House Bill 155, Electric Generation Reliability, if we could have time. We have House Bill 239, Workers' Compensation Student Learner Agreements, if we have time. And we have the Joint Resolution 13 from the House, support of Taiwan. We probably won't have time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, or President.
Senator Hicks.
Mr. President, your committee, number 12, Rules Committee, will be meeting in room W2 at 12:30 to take up House Bill 36, Management Council Membership, House Bill 92, Revisers Bill.
Not to be overlooked, revenue. Senator Case.
Mr. Chairman, we haven't had much to do, but we're going to hunker down tomorrow. At 15 minutes after the noon recess, your Revenue Committee will meet in the Capitol Extension. We'll hear House Bill 189, Mine Product Taxes for Natural Gas Consumed on Site. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Stay in the neighborhood, Senator Landon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Senate Transportation Committee will meet upon adjournment tonight to take up 3 bills. House Bill 190, Vehicle Titles for Non-Resident Owners. House Bill 254, Transportation Computer System. And House Bill 249, Railroad Safety, if time permits. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. President. Privilege of the floor.
Please do.
Thank you. Good senators, today, March 29th, is National Vietnam War Veterans Day. How about a round of applause for our Vietnam veteran, Senator Jim Anderson?
Senator Anderson, thank you for your service. All right, further announcements? Further announcements. You've heard the motion. All in favor say aye. As opposed, nay. We stand recessed until 2 p.m.